Toledo, Castile, 1490. Inquisitor Mateo de Luna was no stranger to fire. He had seen heretics burn in the plazas of Córdoba, witches scream in the wind-chill forests of Navarre, and false prophets weep before the pyres lick their souls away. But none of it compared to what he witnessed in the dungeon beneath San Bartolome Monastery, the self-stank of blood, bile, and candle smoke. The prisoner, Father Guillermo Ortega, was bound with chains sanctified in 7 masses. His body was wrinkled and sunken, but his eyes glowed amber like a beast beneath the skin. Mateo entered quietly, flanked by 2 guards and a hooded man in crimson robes. The script of the tribunal. "I have no need for confession," Guillermo rasped, his voice dry as dust. "I've told your scribes nothing, because you already know. You just want confirmation." Mateo said nothing. He opened a small box tucked beneath his cloak and removed a vial sealed with wax and the sigil of St. Dominic. The liquid inside shimmered between silver and crimson. He placed it gently beside a blank sheet of parchment. The scriptor nodded and handed Mateo a quill made of raven feather and bone. "The ink is prepared," said the scriptor. "Once the name is written, the ledger shall hold it." Mateo dipped the quill in the ink. "State your true name," he said, voice steady, though his fingers trembled. Guillermo smiled, and for a moment fangs protruded from his gums. "Write it Inquisitor. Let your ink remember what your church has tried to forget." Mateo began to write, expecting resistance from the quill. Instead, the feather glided like silk across the page. The letters smoked faintly as they settled. Guillermo, son of Sargon, leech of Lisbon, drinker of children. The parchment groaned, and bled a single drop of red from the word children. It slid down onto the table, thick as wine. The moment the ink dried, Guillermo arched backward and screamed, not in pain but triumph. "You've named me," he howled. "You've bound me to truth. Now see what truth costs." His body burst into flames, no spark, no kindling, just raw combustion. Fire leapt from his skin, curling in on itself, emitting no heat but blistering Mateo's eyes with light. The guard staggered back. The scriptor dropped to one knee, reciting hurried prayers in Latin. In seconds, nothing remained of Guillermo but a pile of fine gray ash and a stench like burnt roses. Mateo's knees gave out. The scriptor helped him up. "The ink does more than record," the scriptor whispered. "It enacts judgment." Mateo stared at the parchment. The words were still there, smoldering faintly, embossed into the fibers like iron into flesh. He had questions. Hundreds. But the scriptor did not allow time for questions. "There is no trial," he said. "Only evidence. And only ink can reveal it." Mateo was summoned to a chapel deep beneath the monastery. This one had no altar, only a stone lectern and an arched ceiling covered in flaking frescoes of angels with swords of ink and scrolls dripping blood. The Grand Inquisitor stood by the lectern, Cardinal Echevarria. His robes were black with red trim, and his eyes were set deep behind heavy lids. "You are not being punished, Mateo," the cardinal began. "You are being entrusted." He gestured to a bound tome resting atop the lectern. It was wrapped in chains, sealed with silver pins in the shape of thorns. When Mateo touched it, the metal was warm, almost pulsing. "This is El Libro de la Sangre Oculta, the Book of Hidden Blood," the cardinal said. "It is our only weapon." Mateo turned the cover. Inside, only one name, Guillermo's. "You've written the first entry," Echevarria said. "Now you will write more." The next morning, Mateo was given a horse, a leather satchel with 3 vials of the sacred ink, 5 blank pages of blessed parchment, and a pouch of communion wafers laced with powdered silver. He was not to speak of his true mission. Officially, he was inspecting rural dioceses for corruption. Unofficially, he was hunting vampires embedded within the cloth, not the ones of folklore, who slept in coffins or feared garlic. No, these creatures could walk in daylight, preach sermons, and baptize children. They were blood sorcerers, sanguinari, who fed not just on bodies but on faith itself, each one protected by layers of deceit, illusion, and sometimes even the church itself. His first destination was the village of Calatrava, a place with no deaths recorded in 12 years, no baptisms in 7, and a priest who never aged. Mateo was to investigate discreetly. Before leaving, the cardinal offered a warning. You will know them not by their evil, but by their charm. Their words will comfort. Their smiles will disarm. But the ink never lies. As Mateo rode beneath the cold Castilian sky, the satchel on his side felt heavier than it should. He had never thought of ink as a weapon, but this ink whispered at night. It warmed in his palm. It remembered. He recalled Guillermo's last words. You've named me. You've bound me to truth. What other names lay buried in silence? How many saints were sinners? How many martyrs were monsters? And more importantly, what price would Mateo pay for knowing? He didn't yet understand the toll, but he would, and the ink would record it all. Outskirts of Calatrava, Castile, 1,490. The road to Calatrava was dust and silence. Mateo de Luna had traveled through God-fearing towns before, but this place, it didn't breathe. He passed fields of unharvested wheat, their golden heads bowed in a windless hush. No crows, no barking dogs, no children laughing in the distance. And when he finally reached the edge of the village, even the bells of the local church tower refused to ring. A single boy watched him enter the village square, standing perfectly still beside an empty well. His skin was gray with dust, and his eyes too old for his years. He didn't speak, just stared. Mateo dismounted. His hand brushed the satchel, containing the sacred ink and parchment. It pulsed again, faintly warm. The church of St. Lucian loomed at the far end of the square, its doors ajar. A red banner fluttered above it, odd for such a remote parish. Red was not a liturgical color in this season. He approached. Inside, the pews were empty, but the air felt full, as if pressed by unseen weight. On the altar stood Father Esteban, the local priest. He was a tall man, unnaturally so, with sun-kissed skin and silver-flecked hair. His face was smooth. No wrinkles. No blemish. Eyes of emerald green. Not uncommon, but piercing in a way that felt rehearsed. Inquisitor de Luna, he greeted with a courteous bow. I had no idea we were under scrutiny. Mateo returned the bow, keeping his voice calm. Routine inspection. Do you mind if I look through your parish records? Esteban smiled. Of course not, but they won't tell you much. We haven't had a death in over a decade. A blessing, wouldn't you say? Mateo forced a nod, even as cold prickles ran down his spine. No deaths, no births. A village sealed in time. Esteban's eyes lingered. You're tired. We keep quarters for pilgrims. Rest first, then we'll talk scripture. Mateo lay awake in the guest chamber, though the bed was soft and the air cool. The ink vial on the nearby desk shimmered faintly. A drop of it had been spilled by accident, or perhaps something else, and it had pulled into the shape of an eye. He blinked. It vanished. Unable to sleep, he returned to the chapel under the cover of moonlight. There, hidden behind the altar, he found a small staircase descending into the catacombs. What he saw below changed him. Rows of villagers, eyes open, stood silent in alcoves like statues. Their skin was pallid, their mouths stitched shut with crimson thread. None of them breathed. None of them moved. But their hands clutched rosaries made of dried sinew and tiny yellow teeth. Mateo's fingers itched toward his quill. The ink burned against his thigh. He ran. He never made it out of town. At dawn, just as he mounted his horse, 3 men emerged from the shadows of the stable. Hooded, silent, their cloaks bore the faint outline of a quill crossing a sword. Do not draw steel, one of them warned. We are not your enemies. You followed me, Mateo said. We've watched you, the second replied. You bear the book. That makes you ours, if you're worthy. The third, a woman with copper skin and an eye scarred shut, stepped forward. Come, let us show you the true nature of this war. Beneath the hills outside Calatrava, in a hollowed-out cavern veiled by trees, Mateo met the Crimson Creed. They were the scripti bellators, the warrior scribes. Few in number, scattered across Castile, they lived to hunt and record the sanguinari. Each member bore a tattooed script upon their forearm. names of vampires they had exposed and executed, written in ink mixed with the blood of martyrs. Their leader, an older man named Valerio, held a page that fluttered despite the still air. "This was once your mentor's," he said, handing it to Mateo. "Brother Ferran." Mateo's heart froze. Ferran, burned 3 years ago for consorting with heretics. But now the truth bled from the page. The ink shimmered. Ferran de Segura, Inquisitor, scribe, betrayed by inkless men. He knew, Valerio said. He died naming them. So must we. They told Mateo the blood rite Esteban had performed under the guise of Easter Massachusetts. Instead of wine, he offered true blood, a sacrament that bound villagers to silence and undeath. "Why don't you strike him down?" Mateo demanded. Valerio handed him a parchment. "Because only you can name him. Only your ink has yet to be tainted by fear." Mateo looked down at the page, blank, save for the first name he had written, Guillermo. Another name waited. His hand shook. At midnight, they returned to the chapel, the warrior scribes cloaked in shadow, Mateo leading them like a reluctant prophet. Esteban awaited him at the altar, as if expecting the confrontation. "No need for swords," he said, voice still honeyed. "Let us talk." "You enslaved your flock," Mateo said. "You bound their mouths." "Why?" Esteban's smile faded. "Because the world is cruel. They came to me with hunger, fear, weakness. I gave them peace. Stillness. Is that not what your God offers?" "You are not a shepherd," Mateo spat. "You are a leech wearing wool." Esteban sighed. "So dramatic." Mateo pulled the quill from its case, dipped it in the sacred ink. "I name you now," he said. "Speak your true name, or I write what the ink reveals." Esteban's eyes flared. Briefly, golden and inhuman. But he laughed. "Go ahead." Mateo wrote, "Esteban of Damascus, leech maker, false priest, binder of flesh." The parchment sizzled. The ink spread on its own, forming thorn borders. Esteban's body convulsed. Blood poured from his ears and eyes. The silver in the ink struck true. He screeched, an unholy, gurgling cry that shattered 2 stained-glass windows, then collapsed into a heap of ash in black robes. The villagers below the church exhaled in unison and crumbled like dry leaves. Their tether was broken. Later, as Mateo sat beneath a torchlit cavern with the warrior scribes, he opened the book of hidden blood to inscribe Esteban's name officially. But something was wrong. A new line had already appeared, written in ink identical to his own. Mateo de Luna, scribe of fire, slayer of kin, bearer of the hollow word. He stared at it, numb. "What does it mean?" he asked. Valerio answered quietly. "The ink sometimes sees what we do not. It records not just the names we write, but the names we become." Mateo closed the book and prayed his name would fade. Valencia Cathedral, Crown of Aragon, 1490. The choir sang of mercy. The incense carried prayers on pale threads of smoke. And high above the pulpit, light poured through stained glass depicting Saint Egidius, with a spear in one hand and a chalice in the other. Inquisitor Mateo de Luna did not join in the hymn. He stood alone in the shadows of the nave, watching the congregation sway with blind devotion. His hand rested on the satchel across his chest, with a book of hidden blood pulsed faintly beneath the leather flap. The ink inside had grown restless, warm without cause, trembling at the edges of consciousness, as if thirsting. He had come here, chasing rumors of miracles. A child healed from plague, a man risen from drowning, a bishop who glowed with divine light during Mass. The church called them acts of grace. Mateo knew better. Miracles had a price, and some were purchased with blood. Bishop Octavio de Rios was a vision in white and gold. At 73, he walked without cane or tremble, his silver beard trimmed with precision, his eyes sharp as broken glass. He welcomed Mateo with open arms and fragrant oils. "An inquisitor in my house? Surely I have not become interesting enough to investigate," Octavio jested. Mateo smiled politely. "Not at all, Excellency. The tribunal merely wishes to ensure that divine wonders are properly chronicled. Then let us dine and speak of God's mysterious graces." They dined beneath arching ceilings adorned with paintings of saints and martyrs. Octavio's hands never trembled as he poured wine. His servants, silent, veiled women with dark lips and lifeless gazes, floated to the hall like spirits. "You don't eat?" Octavio asked. "I fast before confession." Mateo lied. Octavio's smile didn't falter. "Good. Fasting clarifies the soul." As the bishop poured more wine, deep red, nearly black, Mateo glimpsed something in the glass's reflection. For the briefest instant, Octavio's face was wrong. Not monstrous, not disfigured, just hollow, like a mask left too long in sunlight. Mateo blinked. It was gone. The bishop raised his glass. To Revelations. Mateo didn't drink. That night, when the bishop retired to his chambers, Mateo crept through cathedral's rear passages, led by the soft hum of the ink vial against his ribs. It guided him, pulled him, toward a chamber behind the altar, the reliquary. Candles burned on their own. No wind moved, yet the flames flickered toward the ground. He entered. Relics lined the walls, bones wrapped in velvet, jars of dust labeled in Latin, shards of robes and teeth displayed like trophies. One display stood apart, a crystal case sealed with 3 iron locks. Inside, a human heart floated in amber liquid, beating ever so faintly. Beside it, a scroll sealed in red wax. Mateo opened the scroll. It was not scripture. It was a ledger. Bishop Octavio de Rios. Initiated year of our Lord 1331. Miracles granted, 106. Blood exchanged, 62 souls. Tithe received, 1 heart still faithful. Mateo reeled back. This was no bishop. This was a hollow saint. An immortal priest who had bound his soul to a relic to retain divine favor. Fed not by grace, but by sacrifice. He fumbled for his ink and quill. But the parchment resisted. The moment he touched quill to page, the ink recoiled like oil on fire. It hissed, spat, and burned to the feather. The page remained blank. "Curious, isn't it?" said a voice from behind him. Octavio stood in the doorway, robes untouched by shadow, face radiant in candlelight. "You try to write my name, but the ink knows the truth. I was once righteous. I am blessed. I serve the divine. You traded blood for miracles," Mateo growled. "I traded death for hope," Octavio replied. "A village saved is worth a heart. A life extended to grant others peace. Is that not God's work?" "You are no saint," Mateo said, stepping back, drawing a dagger etched with silver crosses. Octavio didn't move. "You are not ready to write me," he said. "Not yet. The ink sees your uncertainty." And then he vanished. No smoke, no scream, just absence. Mateo collapsed to his knees. He looked down. The blank parchment had written a single line on its own. "He wears the mask of holiness, but the heart beats for hunger." Before dawn, Mateo visited a nearby convent rumored to hold a statue of St. Teresa that wept tears of blood. The nuns there had sealed the statue away after several fell into madness. Sister Alondra, the last to speak coherently, met him in a garden of dead roses. "She speaks in dreams," the nun whispered. "St. Teresa, or whatever she has become." Mateo entered the reliquary alone. The statue's face was smooth marble, hands clasped in prayer, and from its eyes flowed a slow, viscous stream of red. He approached, hand trembling. Then the statue moved. Not a full gesture, just a tilt of the chin, subtle and deliberate. Mateo stumbled back. A voice, her voice, rang in his skull. They buried the truth beneath gold and glory. They fed the relics to the faithful. The saints are not sleeping. They are feeding. The stream of blood began to quicken. Mateo dropped to one knee and scribbled frantically on a blank page. Saint Teresa, not weeping, but bleeding. Not mourning, but whispering. She is not carved, she is bound. The ink accepted the truth. The parchment trembled. When Mateo returned to his quarters at the cathedral, he found the book of hidden blood had turned its own page. A new name had begun writing itself. But it wasn't Octavio. It was Ferran. Ferran de Segura, brother, betrayer, watcher, and below it, a second name, still half-formed. Mateo, He slammed the book shut. "Enough," he hissed. But then knocking. A rap on the door. He opened it slowly. No one. Only a parchment nailed to the wood. A simple note, scrawled in dark ink. "Not all ink comes from quills. Some is drawn from veins. You are close to the well. Mount Aralar, Navarra. Winter of 1490. The mountain rose like a fawn against the cloud-choked sky. Frozen pines clung to its craggy face, and ravens circled the summit as if guarding something long buried. The locals called it cursed. They spoke of voices in the wind and lights beneath the snow. Few dared climb it. None returned whole. Mateo de Luna pressed onward, boots crunching over ancient stone steps carved into mountain's flank. His fingers clutched the book of hidden blood beneath his cloak, though it felt less like a weapon now and more like a verdict waiting to be read. He had followed the last parchment's lead, a message scrawled in blood-like ink warning him. You are close to the well. He hadn't understood until the dreams began. Visions of a woman suspended in twilight, her body pierced by silver needles, her lips muttering names in dead languages. A woman bleeding ink. The source, they whispered. The original martyr. The inkwell below. He found the entrance near dusk, an iron door half buried beneath a collapsed shrine. Faded carvings of quills and chalices marked the threshold. The door opened with a groan that echoed deep, far deeper than any natural cavern should. Inside, darkness. Not absence of light darkness, but ink darkness. It clung to the walls like oil, alive and waiting. Mateo lit a blessed lantern and stepped in. The tunnel led down, and down, and down. Carved steps turned to spiraling stone. The walls bled strange moisture. His breath fog in the air, though the deeper he went, the less he felt the cold. Soon, he couldn't feel the weight of his body at all. Only the weight of the book. After an hour, the path ended in a cathedral carved entirely from bone and obsidian, pillars of ribcage, an altar of fused skulls, and behind it, suspended by chains of scripture and blades, floated the woman from his dreams. She was not dead. Her body hovered inches from the ground, arms outstretched, wrists pierced with quills that dripped ink into a basin below. Her eyes were sewn shut with gold thread. Her mouth moved, but no sound emerged. A single beam of pale light fell on her from an unseen source, and around her, on the floor, lay parchment upon parchment, each one recording names, thousands of names. Each name shimmered faintly, as if still remembering. "She is called Letitia," came a voice behind him. Mateo turned, dagger drawn. A tall figure stepped in the shadows, robes black, face obscured by a red hood. His voice was aged but clear. "I am Archivist Sola, keeper of the ink, watcher of the well. You know me?" Mateo asked, not lowering the blade. "I know your ink," Sola replied. "It smells of fear and fire. You've written names that echo. Why is she still alive?" Mateo asked, voice tight. "Why is she bleeding?" She volunteered. Sola said gently, "Long ago, before the Inquisition wore red, she saw the first of the sanguinari, those who drank blood and silenced truth, and she offered herself." Mateo glanced at the basin beneath her. It shimmered, silver black, the surface never still. Her blood becomes the ink? Her memories, Sola corrected. Her pain, her sacrifice, that is what gives the ink power. It's not the silver, not the ash. It's remembrance. Mateo stepped closer. The air shimmered. The book pulsed. Letitia turned her head ever so slightly. Her lips formed a single word. Unwritten. Sola motioned to the skull altar. There lay a scroll sealed with a Vatican crest. Mateo opened it. It was a contract, signed in 1244, between Pope Innocent IV and the surviving Inquisitors of the original tribunal. It outlined the terms of the martyr scribe's imprisonment and a secret accord. In exchange for access to Letitia's ink, the church would cease hunting certain ancient bloodlines. The sanguinari would regulate their own feeding. In return, the names of sanctioned blood drinkers would never be written. A false peace. A lie buried in bureaucracy and prayer. Mateo trembled. "You allowed monsters to remain," he said. "You wrote down only the unsanctioned. the inconvenient. Sola did not argue. Order was preserved. Chaos was avoided. Faith continued. Mateo's hands balled into fists. At the cost of truth, at the cost of everything, Sola said, "Do you not see, Inquisitor? If every name was written, the book would never close. Every pope, every cardinal, every so-called saint. Ink would devour the church from within." Mateo stared at Letitia. She had never stopped bleeding. "You have two options," Sola said. "You may take what remains of her ink, 5 vials, enough to write 5 more names. The worst, the most dangerous. And the other option? End her suffering. Burn the well. Destroy the book." Mateo reached into his satchel and drew out the final parchment, the one that had written itself days ago. His own name stared back at him. Mateo de Luna, scribe of fire, slayer of kin, bearer of the hollow word. What does it mean? He whispered. Sola tilted his head. That you've seen too much, written too much. The book records all who touch it, and it judges not by intention but consequence. Mateo stared at the flickering ink, at the bleeding martyr, at the names swirling across the walls. He thought of Guillermo, of Esteban, of Octavio. He thought of Ferran, his mentor, his friend. He dipped his quill into Letitia's ink and wrote. He began slowly. Cardinal Echeverria. The parchment shuddered violently in his hands. The letters flared with heat, glowing red, then silver. The entire cathedral trembled. Above him, Letitia gasped. The chains rattled. "More," she whispered. Mateo wrote a second name, Archivist Sola. The man before him smiled faintly, then exploded into 1,000 specks of dust. Letitia groaned. The ink boiled. Mateo turned to the basin. It was nearly empty, only enough for 3 names left. He would choose carefully. The mountain rumbled. Rome, 1491. The seat of heaven. Winter fog rolled over St. Peter's Basilica like a living shroud. Crows gathered on the statues of saints. Bells refused to ring. Inside the Sistine Chapel, the air felt thick, not just with incense, but with something older, something watching. Mateo de Luna walked its marble halls in silence, his boots echoing softly. His cloak was tattered from the mountain, his skin pale, but his eyes burned. Behind them, the names swirled. He had 3 vials of ink left, and he had made peace with how they would be used. The Vatican had become a sanctuary not just for the holy, but for the hollow. Pope Alexander VI sat upon the golden throne like a statue sculpted from vanity. His robes gleamed with crimson and pearls. Beside him stood 4 cardinals, each one more decorated than the last. Mateo bowed low, not in reverence, in theater. "Your Holiness," he said, "I bring urgent words from Tribunal Toledo." The Pope's gaze was sharp and suspicious. "I was not told of your arrival." "No one was," Mateo said calmly. "Those who knew are dust." A silence fell. He stepped forward and opened the book of hidden blood, placing it on the velvet dais before the Pope. He withdrew his quill and ink with a slow, practiced motion. "What is this?" one of the cardinals demanded. Mateo smiled. "The truth. Would you like to see it written?" He dipped the quill into the ink. The parchment beneath his hand hissed like it knew what was coming. The cardinals stepped back instinctively. One of them bared his teeth, fangs sharp and unmistakable, before quickly drawing his cowl tight. Mateo began to write. Cardinal Silvio d'Aragona, binder of the orphan choir, leech of innocence. The moment the name was inscribed, the cardinal burst into shrieks, convulsing as smoke erupted from his eyes and mouth. His skin melted into black ichor, which slithered down his cassock in streams. The Pope stood. "Seize him," he roared. 2 guards approached. Mateo turned toward them, not with steel but parchment. "Captain Giano," sworn servant of the Hollow Creed. One of the guards stopped mid-stride. His arms dropped. He fell to his knees, clutching his own name as it scorched across his skin like firebrands. He collapsed motionless. The other turned and ran. The Pope's voice trembled. What are you?" Mateo looked up, eyes haunted. "I am what you created when you stopped writing names. I bring not judgment, Mateo said softly. Only record. Judgment belongs to the ink. He turned to the next page. Alexander VI, shepherd of the false blood, guardian of the pact. The Pope screamed before the quill even touched the paper. He ran toward the altar, robes flaring behind him like wings of flame. No, you can't. This was agreed. It was agreed. Mateo didn't stop writing. As the name took form, the light in the chapel dimmed. The frescoes cracked. The gold leaf curled inward, blackening at the edges. The Pope fell, body twisting, transforming, first into a pale-skinned creature with eyes like rubies, then into a hissing, desperate man again. He crawled toward Mateo, clawing the marble floor. Mercy, he whispered. Mateo finished the name, and the Pope collapsed in a heap of smoke and teeth. Only one vial of ink remained. The book was full, except for a single blank page at the end. Mateo looked down at it. He had known for weeks what the final inscription would be. He sat upon the steps of the desecrated altar, opened his own vein with the quill, and dipped it into his blood mixed with the last ink. His hand trembled. Mateo de Luna, witness of the martyr, slayer of silence, last inquisitor. As the name formed, the book glowed. The blood in its veins thickened, blackened, then turned to fire. The book screamed, not aloud, but in every cathedral bell, every sermon echo, every whispered prayer. Across Christendom, the cathedrals trembled. Frescoes wept black tears. Parchments curled into ash. Hidden relics cracked in their boxes, and in villages and cities alike, people stared skyward as flames danced on invisible winds. Because the truth was no longer written in secret. It was written on the world. In Toledo, peasants saw words appear on stone walls. In Seville, monks watched their ancient scrolls unravel with names written in glowing script across the sky. In Vienna, a convent-stained glass shattered outward, revealing names of sisters who had never died but fed. In Prague, blood boiled from the fonts. In Lisbon, a cathedral burst into crimson light, illuminating the word, unwritten. Valerio and the remaining scripti bellators found the ruins of the Vatican 3 days later. They recovered only ashes. No body, no book, but on the scorched altar, one final line remained, burned into stone. The ink is truth. It cannot be caged. Letitia's well had run dry, but the names were loose. The age of silence was over. Now, the world would remember. Centuries later, a dusty book, blackened at the edges, is discovered hidden inside a church wall. Its pages seem empty, until the light touches them. Then the names return, one by one, burning into view, and across Europe, the old bloodlines begin to tremble again. The ink is never gone. It only waits.